Hello there everybody, welcome to this screencast on behalf of the Manchester and District Local Section Early Career Network. My name is Dr. Randviir. My email is there. If you're interested in this work that's presented here, then please contact me on my email. And I'm going to talk to you briefly here today about the growing problem of textile waste, which is becoming an increasingly problematic area of society, which requires some form of input from chemists in order to actually overcome the challenges which are growing in this area. So hopefully this will be an informative video on how I think we can contribute towards this problem. But first, a little bit about me. So that's a picture of me on the left at home, working from home during lockdown. I am a lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University. I have been a lecturer since February 2018 at Manchester Met. Previous to that, I did my master's I did my MChem at the University of Hull, MChem with nanotechnology, where I graduated in 2007. Then I moved to Manchester to do my PhD in electrochemistry, where I developed sensors for many things, electrochemical sensors, specifically for targeting biomarkers for kidney failure. And then after my PhD, I went on to work with the waste management industry. So I worked alongside Viridor and Greater Manchester Waste Disposal Authority, where I did a lot of consultancy-based work using my expertise in chemistry, analytical chemistry specifically, to solve a few issues on sites, particularly with technology failures and corrosion problems. And to the modern day, I'm now a lecturer, as I just said, but I'm also the chair of the Manchester and District Local Section, and also I'm a committee member on the Applied Materials Chemistry Group with the RSC. And more recently, I'm involved in a very large European Interreg-funded project called SERMAP, where we look to develop 3D printed concrete architectures, urban architectures. And what we mean by that is things like benches and walls and things like that. But we're involved very much with the technical side of things. So how to actually make formulations of concrete using recycled fine aggregates. So all my work's basically bringing together waste issues with the fun chemistry side of things. So I'm going to talk to you about textiles today, right? So the reason why this is a problem, so fashion is a massive problem. There's an idea in society now where fashion has become so cheap, particularly with shops like Primark and Boohoo. It's so cheap that people essentially use these as big giant throwaway fancy dress shops. You can buy a t-shirt now in Primark for £2, and some people will buy this t-shirt, wear it once and then throw it away. And this is becoming a huge societal issue, to the point where 5% of waste to landfill now is textile waste, and this is a huge issue. If you think about how much that actually is, it's roughly 1.2 million tonnes a year. 1.2 million tonnes. It's not insignificant. So this is something which we need to address in our society, because we don't actually have any recycling processes for clothing on a large scale at the moment. Secondary to this is the behavioural aspect of things. And if we look at the latest government research on a parliamentary committee, on a select committee, they actually found that 1 in 5 young people would not wear clothes again if they were pictured in it on Instagram. That's an absolute societal disgrace, and we are all responsible for developing this paradigm. Social media is so powerful, and it's so powerful to young people that they wouldn't want to be seen in the same clothes again, which is leading in part to this societal paradigm where all these clothes get thrown away to landfill. And this is all in this Fixing Fashion report that you can find on the government website. So we've got this problem about clothing waste. Well, what do we do with it? Well, the first thing is, we need to know what it's made of. And if we break it down, generally speaking, roughly 65% of our clothing is polyester and 35% cotton. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about today, is a little bit about polyester and maybe some research on what we can do in order to try and recycle this polyester. But first of all, we need an idea of where this polyester is actually going to go if we do find an end market for it. And it just sort of happens that we live in a society now where plastic waste is also on the increase, but the negative impacts of plastic are increasingly being spoken about, and this is a very, very good thing. The UK Plastic Pact, which is a pact developed by the Waste and Recycling Action Programme. It's a government charity, government-associated charity, which dedicates itself to waste. They have brought together over 80 of the biggest producers of plastic. That account for 85% of overall plastic packaging in the UK. They've all come together and set 4 separate challenges in this UK Plastic Pact. One of the challenges that's been set is by 2025 they want to raise the recycled plastic content across all plastic packaging. This is not an insignificant target. This is a very, very difficult target to reach. So what we need in this area, then, we need a lot of different innovation in order to increase this recycled content, because it's not an easy process to actually recycle plastic as much as it might appear so on the face of things. Now the good thing about this is that the clothing situation in the plastic packs at the same time, if we consider PET, food packaging film, to be chemically identical to polyester clothing, which realistically it is chemically identical, then potentially polyester clothing can actually be a sustainable source of monomers for plastic film, which means that technically we should be able to recycle clothing into new plastic film. So my research in the future is focusing on this particular area. Can we develop new recycled plastic film from waste clothing? Now they can already do this for plastic bottles and things like that. But the thing about most polyester plastic bottles is that they don't have any contaminants in it which affect the degradation chemistry. Because what actually has to happen when we deal with these plastics is that we actually have to chemically unzip them into their constituent monomers. The problem with waste clothing is that there's added consideration with dyes, and we're going to get onto that in a little bit later on. So polyester, you probably already know this, but I'll say it anyway, very quickly. Polyester, we take ethylene glycol, which is basically antifreeze, which is made from fractional distillation of crude oil. And we mix it with terephthalic acid, which is derived from xylene. Xylene looks a little bit like this, for those that don't know. Xylene is an oil-derived compound, and what they do, they oxidize this xylene and make terephthalic acid, and it's the biggest source of monomers for polyester. React these two things together in the presence of a catalyst, and we get this polyester, this lovely looking polyester, and depending on the molecular weight, gives it different types of properties. And the polyester, which we know, which we wear, is all this nice fibres that are flexible, and they're great because they're quite hydrophobic. It's not what you call waterproof, but they're fairly hydrophobic. They're very sort of hard wearing. It's a fantastic material, and to the point where it's over 65% of clothing fibres worldwide are made from polyester. Okay, right, so that's the polyester synthesis, right. But what can we do on a lab scale in order to strip this apart? So a lot of work has been done on what's called hydrothermal degradation. You might have heard of this before. Hydrothermal is just a process whereby we put small scale reactors under a high pressure, low temperature reaction, stick it in the oven, and we can chemically convert waste into something else, normally a carbon source. So this is a very, very small scale hydrothermal reactor. You get bigger ones and bigger ones on a lab scale, and as they get bigger, you get more pressure gauges and things like that with them. And the basic process is just to stick your clothing material or your waste material into your reactor with an acid or water or whatever you want to put it in with, for a set amount of time at a set temperature, and in the end you'll get this hydrochar, which your waste converts into a solid hydrochar, and then a liquid hydrosilate that is formed, and it's really smelly and horrible and contains a lot of different chemicals, including ethylene glycol. So it's a very, very simple process. In effect, you just stick in your waste in a pot, stick it in the oven for a set period of time, and then you get your products out at the end. And then you clean up your products. So when we do this on a polyester cotton mix, this is not pure polyester. This is polyester and cotton. We can take a lab coat, a standard lab coat, 35% polyester, 35% cotton, 65% polyester, and we convert it in our hydrothermal reactor, and we go from the image on the left, which you can see the nice fibrous materials there. You can't really tell which is which, polyester or cotton, but in the end we get something like this. And we can see from this image here we've got two very distinct types of materials. You've got this porous looking stuff here that I've just highlighted there, and then we've got this more ordered crystalline looking material here and here and here. And it's quite clear that there's two different materials being formed here, and that should be fairly straightforward if you think about it, because we've got cotton and polyester, so they're going to be forming two different materials, or at least you would think so anyway. And if we have a look at this a little bit closer using Energydispersive X-ray spectroscopy, we can actually see that these two materials are significantly different. If we look at the carbon-oxygen ratios, the one on the left, we've got approximately 2:1 carbon-oxygen ratio, whereas the one on the right is approximately 3:2 carbon-oxygen ratio. Other things to note is that on the left, whatever acid we use, the one on the left, the counter ion of the acid seems to intercalate itself within the structure, whereas the one on the right, the counter ion doesn't seem to intercalate itself within the structure. So the acid that we use for degradation seems to be quite important when we're doing polyester cotton mixes. So it turns out the thing on the right is actually terephthalic acid, TPA, which is the molecule which we've already talked about in this. We'll just pop that down here again. Okay, whereas the other one is derived from the cotton, and we're not particularly interested in that, so we won't go any further into that. So we'll look at the crystal structure. This is how we determined what the crystalline product was. If we take the hydrochar, stick it in the powder X-ray diffraction experiment, we find that the actual crystal profile, the diffraction pattern, is almost identical to terephthalic acid. So that's a quite nice identity tool for us. We can use X-ray diffraction to find out what our product is. Okay, this is great. We actually find it's a triclinic unit cell, which makes things a little bit difficult to work with because triclinic unit cells are very complicated. And it's probably the case that no matter what sample you run, you always get a slightly different diffractogram because terephthalic acid itself is quite a complicated molecule from a crystallography point of view. Okay, right. So that's the basics then. So let's get on to what don't we know. So we know all about the degradation of these things. We know that the polyester will split into its constituent parts fairly easily. But the thing is that if we're going to use waste clothing which has dyes in there, and we're going to develop a technology to deal with this 1.2 million tons of clothing waste, what we need to do is we need to be able to understand what role these dyes play on these end products, because the problem that we've got is that the technology does exist to degrade polyester into its constituent monomers, but the monomers are not pure enough. The monomers are 97% pure under the best technologies, and this is not good enough, because if we have anything less than 99% pure terephthalic acid monomers, we cannot create food grade packaging plastics. We need 99% pure, and actually to elevate that purity up, we have to go through something called the Amoco process. If you want to read about that, it's the Amoco process. The Amoco process is basically a catalytic hydrogenation process whereby we get rid of all the impurities, such as benzaldehyde and things like that, all the rubbish that we don't want. And the catalytic hydrogenation process uses a platinum catalyst and compressed hydrogen and air. And it's a very expensive process. So we need to raise this quality of monomers. We need to get the best quality terephthalic acid monomers out of this reaction as we can. And the first thing to do is to try and understand what role the dyes play if we are to move towards this high purity monomer. So we need to know what roles these dyes play as an enzyme inhibitor first of all, because we've got all these different dyes. We've got countless numbers of dyes. Polyester gets dyed with what's called dispersed dyes. You can't just put dyes on polyester. They have to have dye vehicles called dispersants. And there's loads of different ones. The structures are always very similar, but not the same. The first thing that we need to know is that, well, if we're going to use enzyme technology, which is the most promising technology for creation of these monomers, then we need to know whether these dyes inhibit these enzymes. You'll probably know, but certain molecules can attach onto enzymes. If you get a substrate, like this, and then an enzyme which looks a bit like this, from a thingy point of view, if you get a dye that sort of attaches itself onto the enzyme, then this active site here can get completely messed up by this dye, just by virtue of the fact that the dye attaches itself onto the protein. So we need to assess the role of these dyes as enzyme inhibitors, and if we find out that the dyes do act as enzyme inhibitors, what can we do to prevent this from happening? So can we prevent it? So that's one of the research questions that we're currently in the process of answering in our research. Do these dyes act as enzyme inhibitors? The likelihood is that they do, and if so, can we prevent it, or at least can we limit it, or can we study the Michaelis-Menten kinetics of it, such that we can set the conditions so that this doesn't happen, or this enzyme dye binding doesn't happen. So that's the first thing that we want to know from the research. Secondly, do these dyes act as chemical intermediates? The mechanism for polyester in that instance needs to be studied, because polyester, it's a polymer. Obviously, it's a very large molecule, and there's going to be all sorts of different reactions occurring across the molecule during a degradation, and if you have these dispersed dyes present within the reaction mixture, it's likely that some of these amine groups or carbonyls or hydroxyl groups or whatever else, it's likely that these may participate in the reaction. So we want to find out to what extent do the dyes participate in the reaction. And if we can find out to what extent, we can determine what the kinetics are. We can determine how best to set up our future reaction, our future degradation reaction, in order to prevent these dyes from participating in the reaction as best as we possibly can. But the starting point for that is knowing exactly how the dyes behave as chemical intermediates. It's likely that they will participate, but to what extent at the moment we just don't know. So that's another thing that we need to look at. Thirdly, as a dopant, so in the end, when we do finally get our terephthalic acid product out of the reaction, again I'll just draw this on here. When we do finally get our terephthalic acid, and it's in this nice lovely crystal structure, we need to find out, well, actually, do these dyes intercalate themselves within the crystal structure? Okay, and how does that affect the unit cell? Does this affect the unit cell? And if so, does this have an effect on the plastic that we make out of it? Because this is the aim at the end of the day. We're trying to make the highest purity monomers so that we can form food grade plastics. And if these dyes are intercalating themselves within the unit cell structure, there's going to be some inherent impurities within that unit cell, which will prevent the normal polycondensation reactions from occurring, which will in the end affect the overall quality of our food grade polyester that we need to produce out of this. So those are the three work streams that we're thinking of pursuing with this. Just in summary then, so my research, it hopes to develop technical routes for new plastic film from waste. This is for the Plastic Pact and to try and solve the problem of fast fashion. Remember, 1.2 million tonnes of clothing every year needs to be addressed. Okay, waste clothing is not recycled and is a candidate for this, but the dye chemistry in degradation needs further understanding. And it needs understanding from an enzyme inhibition point of view. It needs understanding from an intermediate point of view, and it also needs understanding from a doping point of view in the terephthalic acid unit cell. Okay, everybody. So I hope that video was informative and interesting to you today. I'd like to thank the Early Career Network for all the hard work they've been doing over lockdown to try and develop the network in Manchester and District over the past few months. If you do have any inquiries about the Manchester and District's activities, you can always email me. My email is e.randviir, remember the double I, at mmu.ac.uk. We do have money available if you want to run events or anything like that. Please get in touch for speculative inquiries. I hope that was interesting to you today. Thank you for your time.